again. There we go. It is going to be recorded and it will be posted to the Kitchissippi Ward YouTube channel in the next few days. So if anyone that you know, one of your neighbors can't make it tonight and they want to view it, they will be able to. And also you can go back and look at it as well. And if you have trouble finding the channel, just send our office a message for the link and we'll get back to you. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Jocelyn and her team. Thank you.
Hi there. I think you have a few other people who have joined too.
Okay.
To invite them into our virtual room.
Yeah, I see that. I will. Okay.
So I know they can hear me, so I'll sort of roll this along.
Yeah. So I think I got everyone. If I missed anyone, you want to be a panelist, just let me know. Thanks.
All right, super. So my name is Jocelyn Chandler. JFC is a small consulting firm here in Ottawa. Keeping me company is Tim Eisner. He works with me as a planner. And Dave Meikle, who's also on the screen, is the agent for the new owners of those 4 buildings. So we're gonna, just to give you some context here, we were approached by Dave on behalf of his clients to investigate putting a 4th unit into these buildings. There's no zoning bylaw amendment application on the table right now. We're doing the investigation, the consultation. We're looking into how viable it is and what it would take to get there. We have gone through the documentation from the difficult history on these properties, the severance, the minor variance, the turn down by the Committee of Adjustment, the subsequent LPAT hearing that approved what you have built there today. We've consulted with city staff to get some feedback from them. We spoke to Councillor Leeper, and he gave us sort of a little bit more history, and we also had 2 representative members of the community at our city pre-consult. And I've also spoken to Murray Chan, the previous planner, who some of you may be familiar with from the previous applications. So rather than forging ahead, it was my preference that we come and speak to you guys who live in the community, given the level of interest and concern that the original applications to build these buildings garnered. So I don't think there's a lot that I need to tell you all. You live probably on the street. Those buildings are pretty much constructed. One of them is occupied, 2 of the units. The second one looks pretty much complete to me. Dave can answer questions if there are any about the actual construction and status of it itself. And it looks like the other 2 are sort of working on their cladding and closing in as we speak. So I'm just gonna get the slideshow to run here. Would someone concern that you guys see the right thing? I hope there's a slideshow appearing on your screen.
There is not.
No,
There is not?
No.
Shoot. Well, I wonder.
And I'm going to guess you're a co-host, so Alice has given you permission to share, I'm assuming.
One would think. So that's all right. We'll have another go at this. Let's see. We'll try and do this a slightly different way. Screen line. Nope. Let's try this.
Oh, this is looking good. We're looking at a title slide for a PowerPoint presentation called 609, 611, 613, and 615 Parkview. I'm guessing that's the right one.
We are all in the right place. Let's see if I can change the slide now. I can. All right, we're good. So, like I said, this is going to be brief. These are the 4 units. We've just sort of put on top the site plan that is being built there right now. This is the site plan as is expected to be built. There are no proposed changes to the site plan. What's there is what's going to stay. I put this in just for anyone who hasn't glanced at the street in the last week. This is the status that the construction is at right now. And this is what is currently approved. So each building has 3 units. Top floor is a 2-bedroom unit. Middle floor is a 2-bedroom unit. The ground floor and the basement is a 4-bedroom unit. What's being proposed is to split that ground floor unit to be a ground floor 2-bedroom unit and a basement 2-bedroom unit. There's the zoning bylaw amendment that would be required to do this would move it from an R3 zone to an R4 zone. And an R4 zone allows for apartment buildings. So we would be applying for an R4 zone, but we'd be attaching a bunch of exceptions or rules to it to prevent it from becoming anything more than like to keep the rights as exactly what you see before you today, plus that 4th unit in the basement. So we would have to do things, the standards for the R4 zones, we would have to amend to reflect the lot size, the lot width, and that it's only allowed the 4 units. The building itself, we will have to add bike parking to it. That's not an issue. There would be an access door or of some sort added to the rear, and Dave can confirm that that's correct. I don't know if the access door is already there or if they just at least have to change the outside a little bit. Dave?
There's a rear entrance to the building, and then they would, through the closet, I believe it is, they make another stairway.
Okay, so that would be how the basement apartment would have its own unique access.
Correct. Yeah.
There could be, we don't think so, but it wouldn't be until building code that we'd really know requirements for perhaps some changes to the glazing or treatment. That would be windows or cladding. We don't think so. It looks like it meets all the requirements for an R4 zone in terms of how it looks. And there is an overlay on the property that requires certain landscaping standards. We believe that it meets all of those as well, but they would be discovered through this zoning bylaw amendment process. But from our review, what you're looking at there right now, other than making changes to that access at the rear yard and adding a bicycle rack, is all that, well, or bicycle storage of some sort, is all that we're contemplating. All of these units are rentals, and the expectation is they will stay that way. So this slide just shows you the rear accesses that would be added. Right now, there's a front access to the main floor, and then the 2 accesses on the side to the 2nd and 3rd floor units. Now, I will tell you that what I wanted to explain is what's changed between when you all last saw this come before you regarding the severance and the minor variances that were previously requested. And there have been a few changes. For one thing, the province has really aggressively emphasized the addition of housing. There's a focus on providing more units that address what's called the missing middle. So not the freehold or duplex and not the small apartment, but that group in between that's looking for housing right now. The city has a new official plan that places a strong emphasis on intensification and adding units in urban areas. And where this property is, which is right here, is this purple speckled area, is called an evolving neighborhood. And this is one of the areas that intensification is being promoted by the planning staff and in the new official plan. The other thing that's changed is that there's new owners. These are not the owners who went through the original severances to create the 4 lots and the minor variances. So the new owners are the ones who are looking for this. And I do know that through that previous process, there were promises made by the new owners about not adding any more units. And I do know that Murray Chown said he would not support more than 3 units in this area. In speaking to Murray, he has said that because of the official plan changes and the new policies that he would have had to change his tune on that now. But just to let you know, like we have gone down all those roads to see where policy will lead us. So this evolving neighborhood overlay, which is causing stress in a lot of the existing urban neighborhoods, it's basically looking to add growth just through intensification. I can go through this in detail if you like. There will be a large comprehensive zoning bylaw program undertaken by the city over the next couple years. Councillor Leeper may know what the actual execution date or when we're next expecting to see something a little more solid. It could be that this type of zoning bylaw amendment may become as of right through this. I don't know. But this is the density that's being sort of promoted through the urban areas right now, and the evolving neighborhood overlay, because it's considered to be near transit and arterial roads, is one of the areas that's being focused on. I can go through this in detail if you like. For now, it's just a summary of what's in the official plan policies today. I had added this slide in at the end, as well as this one, just looking at the rear yard and the trees, because I know that this is also a concern of the community. Councillor Leeper's office, and I don't know that you guys have any information yet, but we have looked into trying to address this noise wall issue that could result in tree loss, or maybe already has. I don't know what trees were there before. But with that, I'd like to sort of open the floor. That's really all we have to present to you, because we're not really changing anything on the ground. And now I need to figure out how to stop sharing, which will be there. So Tim will certainly take notes, as will I. We'll answer any questions we can. And other ones we'll get back to you on. So Allison, I don't know if you want to MC this.
Sure,
in
yeah,
terms
no,
of
I'm just
taking
waiting to
questions,
see,
or-
I'm not seeing any raised, okay, Krista is the first
I'll
raised
raise
hand.
my physical hand, not my
Your
little
yellow
green
one?
That
hand.
works, that works. Yeah, go ahead, Krista.
So, thank you for the presentation. I guess I just, I want to ask a little bit of a question to those on the call. It wasn't really clear to me what the purpose of today's call is, and what are you looking for from the community?
What are we looking for from the community? Some input from you. Is the major concern traffic and parking? Is the tree concern still an issue? Really, when we go back to our client, well, who Dave is representing, how big a hill are they going to have to fight? Is it possible that they will achieve this? Will they alienate the community? We don't just take on projects and say, sure, we'll take this one on for you. Some of them aren't worth it. And if we decide it's not worth it for us as planners, maybe there's impacts we're unaware of, then we give that information back to Dave, and it's up to his client to decide to pursue it with someone else or to drop it and work with what they have. But all we can do right now before we give that advice is collect information from you guys and from the city staff. And like I said, the research that we did.
Appreciate that. I guess, and this is going to sound like a very stupid question, but just bear with me.
Unlikely.
I'm assuming as planners, you guys have been on our street.
I came for a walk down there just the other day to take these pictures, but actually I don't live terribly far from you all. And I grew up in this part of Ottawa, so I know Hampton Park. I watched the first bridge replacement on the Queensway from the bleachers there. I do know the area quite well.
That sounds quite local, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a dog who likes to visit your park. Yeah.
So we're quite passionate about our community, and as such, you've reviewed all the documentation. We would prefer these not to become 4 units each. For a number of different reasons, the growth and the exponential growth, I would say, of the intensification that has already happened in our street. with the addition of 4 triplexes where there used to be 2 homes, greatly increases the traffic on the street. It greatly increases, like, it's not something that I think the community would be happy about. It also changes the landscape of the street. I'm probably not the best person to speak to this particular topic, but there was a lot of trees on the street, and in this particular area, both in front and in back. Those are now gone. So the street now looks quite bare when taken into context of all the recent development that has happened in the past with our street. There's also the parking issue on the street. So, you know, is there any parking for these now, you know, what is it? 3 times 4, 12 units that could have double occupancy. And so 2 cars a unit. You know, we're not a huge street, and we also butt up against 2, like a park, which, you know, Hampton Park, which has 2 baseball diamonds. So imagine that in the summer. As it is, there's no parking. And it's lovely that the city believes that everyone's going to take public transportation, but with a combo of it not being reliable, particularly in the winter, and, you know, decreasing ridership, which the city is well aware of, that's not something that I think we would welcome, the additional traffic load to the street.
Okay, so we're still it's additional traffic, parking, the trees, regardless of what had been built here. That noise wall and the trees in the rear, they don't really have anything to do with what it was built. It appears to have been a building code requirement. We've been trying to chase this down just because I was absolutely baffled by it. And I know that Mr. Leeper's office, Councillor Leeper's office, is looking into it. But yes, I could see on your street that there are a lot less trees, certainly on the side that has been more redeveloped than the other side. There's 1 tree being preserved on the front of these. Can't go backwards. So like I said, the buildings that are there are the buildings that are going to stay. There's no changes. We're not going to be able to change the tree scenario, whether they move forwards with this or not. The parking stays the same. There is 1 parking spot provided at the rear for each building. So that's 1 parking spot for 4 units, as opposed to 1 parking spot for the 2 2-bedroom units and the 1 4-bedroom unit. I don't think there's any way that I can, there's arguments in both directions about parking. I'm sure you've heard them all. And about traffic and about transportation. There is 0 requirement for parking for these buildings right now. They don't even have to provide 1 parking space. So that one would be staying. And whether changing 4-bedroom units into 2 2-bedroom units would add to the traffic or not on the street, I think everybody's going to have their own opinion on it. But I hear you loud and clear, and it's obvious by the narrowness of the street and the limited parking, and especially living next to those ball diamonds. In fact, I have staff who said, "Oh yeah, when we play ball there, we park up and down those streets." So I see that you guys are suffering from that for sure. But I hear you, that stuff is clear, and I'm not sure. Like, again, this is something that we're going to have a good think about is, are there ways to address this? Is that just the status quo in the way the city is moving forwards now, and it's not going to change one way or the other? Will an additional unit that divides a 4-bedroom unit in 2 add cars? Not sure about that either. But
can I ask about the zoning? So I want to
Yeah.
know specifically.
There's someone who had their hand up.
Yeah, we're going.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh, sorry. I wasn't on the view with everybody, so I'll put my hand up then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on. Sharon, I see you've had your hand up for a while. Would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll just lower my hand first, or I'll forget. I can speak to the tree issue because I made the original presentation on the application when before these were built. So more than 12 mature trees were taken out. What was retained on the front is an eastern white pine, which meets the mature bylaw. Whether it's the new one or the old one, it still met it. The one at the back that is protected, well, not very well, is a yellow birch, and I do not see a good future for that tree as this was being built. I have watched the entire thing being built. Water has been dumped in the back of the park. The forest has already been impacted by the removal of those trees and the additional light that is now shining on top of it. So I want to know if I'm not going to talk to, the philosophy behind missing middle or parking or anything. I want to know what mitigative measures, if this does go forward, even if it doesn't go forward, what mitigative measures can we expect in terms of green space? Because I really like this, how this neighborhood overlay takes into account lots of things, but it doesn't seem to take into account adjacent green space. The green space directly behind this development is city owned, and literally across the path is federal NCC property. So I haven't seen anything from the old developer or the current one to suggest that maybe there's, some sort of maybe we can have something for Hampton Park as some of those mitigative measures, because this is what this site is doing already. So it is going to have an impact going forward. There's going to be more compaction of the soil around it. There's going to be far less infiltration, which means it's coming into the park. So I'm not going to speak to the parking. As I said, I do not live on the street. I represent the Friends of Hampton Park, and I represent that forest. I have a permit with the NCC to do work. Jeff knows quite well what we've been doing for the last 4 years. So that's my concern, and I would like that definitely taken back and considered seriously.
That's some super useful information. Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand, Sharon. I just want to make sure I try to understand what you're asking for, because, and I'm sorry, at the moment I don't. What would that look like? Like, what are some possibilities there?
Well, when things are taken, when a tree is taken out, for example, right, you get sort of a cash in lieu. There's sort of a quid pro quo to put back the value of what was lost. You can't put the value of what was lost on those two properties back onto those properties now. There's no room, but we've got room. That's what I'm asking for. So if there's a deal already in the works between the city to get green space dollars because this development removes so many trees, I would suggest that Hampton Park is an ideal location for those dollars to be spent and invested in vegetation, in trees, whatever we need.
Okay. So it's replacement trees
As
off-site
a mitigative measure, not only that, as a mitigative measure, but also as a sign of really good faith and a potential, really a good, maybe a good example of going forward with some other developments that are going forward, because there's no way they're going to be able to put back the value of trees that they remove from various other developments. So we have to start getting a little bit creative, I think, with the way we do that.
Yeah, there should be, and I'm going to ask Alice to take a look at this. The any of the designated trees or the distinctive trees, there should have been cash from the original developer for the removal of those in order to fund city replacement of trees. That fund is extremely opaque, and I'm not sure how it's being spent. So I'm going to ask Alice to find out, did the previous developer have to pay? And I'm guessing they did. It's pretty standard. And then where that cash is and how it might be spent.
Okay, yeah, I've made a note of that, Sharon, and we'll look into that and get back to you. Okay.
And you know, honestly, what I have not come across in the paperwork is whether a landscape plan was required. I know what's green, what's paved and what's not paved. I haven't seen a landscape plan. I don't know if there is one. That's something that we can look into. And I'm sure that Dave and I can go back and speak with the owners and see if they would be agreeable to, you know, making some sort of contribution towards planting in Hampton Park, if that's something that would be helpful. We'll go and see how they feel about that, if that would help.
And I also think there was a discussion along the way about not having a noise wall because some trees would have to be removed. I think by potentially having a savings and not having to put a noise wall, perhaps that could go towards mature trees or something like that.
That was on my radar a few months ago, and I'm sorry, I don't know where that ended up, but I'm sure Alice can get me caught back up again.
Yeah,
did speak to her
that's on my
about it.
list. Yeah, look into. Okay, I think we'll move on to Greg. I see your hand is up now. So Greg, do you want to go ahead?
Right, yeah, thanks. Oh, can you see me? Hold on.
We can
So
see
just
you.
about the zoning, so you mentioned, so this would be to zone at an R4, which is an apartment building. I want to understand the implications of that, in particular in terms of precedent on the street. There's other properties on the street that will be developed. Like to hear from Jeff about, like, what does that mean? How can we think about, I know that's not this property, but like that's a pretty big issue. So I get the missing middle, but you know, I think the way that you destroy community support for intensification is to do it badly. I think this is a pretty good example of badly. And I think there's a pretty good recognition of that, I hope, anyways. In terms of, you know, I've seen other examples of developers genuinely taking on input from the community, and we had none of that, right? We were beaten down pretty clearly with no opportunity to have any influence, despite trying to be constructive. But anyway, moving on. Wondering, so I wouldn't mind a comment about that, like helping understand maybe from the developer to like just for the planner, like what does R4 mean? How should we think about that? Can it be confined to this property? So that two other, like one question about the official plan, which now is different from, I guess, when we originally had the proposal. I mean, I guess I take that point, although we had followed the rules of the last official plan, and very clearly demonstrated why the plan that ended up coming to fruition did not meet the tests of that last official plan. It didn't matter. So I just wonder why now we're held to the standard of the new one, where this is the street where the missing middle needs to find a home, despite Carling not being a transit hub. I mean, there's one pretty slow bad bus down there, but others will know better than I. And then maybe one suggestion, a specific question about, and some of the neighbors thought about, could the city start to plow Hampton Park's parking through the winter, to alleviate parking stress? That's really when it bites, when the streets are narrow, and so when you have two rows of cars down both sides of a narrow street, it becomes impossible to get out of your driveway, you know, let alone drive up and down the street. Wondered whether that's something that could be explored. Thanks.
Maybe Councillor Leeper, I'll answer a couple of those questions. So R4 zoning. Basically, there's a couple ways that you can go about adding units, and none of them are basically acceptable. You could try for a minor variance to add another unit in. That's not the appropriate use of a variance process. We talked about doing an R3 zone and just adding another unit in the exception, but the city staff didn't like that idea either. We just thought it sounded, you know, it's sort of the way you're talking about the perception of an R4, because it actually starts to talk about apartment buildings. We would have loved to have avoided that. Basically, we were told that's not the way you can do it. It has to be an R4. Now, the R4 zone would be limited to these 4 properties, red box drawn around it in the zoning. The R4 would only apply in there. And then the way zoning works is you can you can take a general zone and write really specific rules that apply to that zone. So we would take an R4 zone and then it would be, the city has suggested a UC subzone, which speaks a little bit to property size. It gives some metrics, not super useful for you guys' purposes, but then we would be adding in our request onto that, that it would limit these properties to what's there, but allow for 4 units. So not to allow any further expansion. We just don't have a choice really about what residential zone we use, but we would have to make sure the language in that zone specifically reflected what was planned on those properties and didn't allow for more. As far as precedence goes, there's precedence is always raised. It's always possible that something can be used as precedence. More important than precedence in planning, though, is the governing policy in the official plan, and if what you're proposing meets those policies.
That's hard for this street to swallow.
I understand.
Anyway,
I understand. I have to tell you how
doesn't mean
how it's
anything.
supposed to work. Yeah.
Yeah, we would love it to work how it's supposed to work, but
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. But policy in the official plan should be far more important than precedence.
So let me ask you, just so constructive, and thank you for walking through like the various ways you can think about R3. And from a precedent though, like, I mean, you walked in the street, there's another big piece of property across the street, right? Like there will be more development on the street. We understand that. Is there a way in which, well, the city planners might not like it because it doesn't fit with the rules and how we do things, where it actually might be helpful from our perspective? And I know that's, you're not working for us, but we might be more supportive of your client if we could sort of get at things like that.
So here, I mean, I can only be very bluntly honest with you. Anyone can apply for anything at any time. Right?
Right.
There's no rule you can put in place that says you can never, ever have a 4-unit. You can never, ever build an apartment building. Anyone under the Planning Act, anyone can apply for a zoning or even an official plan amendment. That's always an option. And it's just going to be whether the tests are acceptable, if it's a staff approved, a staff delegated application, whether staff agree with it, whether council agrees with it, and whether the community hates it enough to appeal it. And that is the absolute blunt truth. There is nothing that you could do that would make something stick forever if someone decided to apply for something different.
Thank you for your candor.
Mechanism. Yeah, sorry.
She's quite right. So if this became an R4, I suspect that it would make it much easier for people to build R4 along and then R4. So if this R4 is written such that it allows only 4 units, that could be interesting precedent. So it would be more difficult. R4 is what I've got in Hintonburg, right? It's low-rise apartment buildings that allow 12 or 16 units is generally what R4 is used for. The height limits are very similar to what the R3 allows in Westboro. The building envelope is very similar, but what R4 allows you to do is build a lot more units within that low-rise apartment building form. If this were restricted to a 4-unit R4, that might have sway as you look at some of the other properties to be done. You know, if somebody builds long semis down here, they're going to get 4 units per dwelling anyways, right? The difference between 3 and 4 units from a official plan perspective in a low-rise neighborhood is there's no meaningful difference. And our next comprehensive zoning bylaw review will probably have some form of 4 units in every building, in every residential lot across the city anyways. So I am listening to this conversation. If it's a shame that city staff are pushing back, and it's a conversation that I might want to have a bit more with them to keep it at an R3, with that sort of single exception. I'm trying to think, and I'm sorry, we've done this so many times now, and I fought them all, and I haven't won any of them yet. Converting triplexes into 4 units has been done over and over and over again in this ward. And I believe in each case, yeah, it's the R4 that they're looking at, but that doesn't necessarily open the door to a 12 or 16 unit. It's something I want to think a little bit more about. This is not, so on Parkview, honestly, council's not going to care whether it's 3 units or whether it's 4 units in each of these. In the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, what you're going to see is something like what was done in Westboro, where the interior of the neighborhood, and it's the template for the new official plan. We did it anticipating what the new official plan was going to do. On the interior of the neighborhood, we're going to keep things at a low rise scale. And we're probably, 3 units or 4 units, sort of put some wrappers around that density. At the edge of the community, we're going to do R4s. And that would include the low-rise apartment buildings that could have 12 or 16 units in them. So you see along Byron, for instance, along some of those corridors, the R4s are kind of at the edge. So on Churchill, on Byron. And then once you get closer to the transit stations, whatever, you can build 60-story towers everywhere. Parkview is not, in my view, an edge. So when the comprehensive zoning bylaw review comes out, I would not anticipate, whether this R4 goes through or not, I would not anticipate seeing a Hintonburg style 12 to 16 unit low rise apartment building allowed on Parkview. I think you'll see those allowed on Churchill, and even greater density on Churchill, some of the mid-rise stuff. I'm having a hard time imagining, though, that, and sorry, I'm thinking out loud, which I shouldn't do, but I'm having a very difficult time imagining that a 4-unit R4 on Parkview would open the door to 12 or 16 unit R4s, which is normally what an R4 is. Are you going to see more 4-unit R3s? Absolutely. And I'll be just as blunt as Jocelyn. I know when you folks were at the Committee of Adjustment, I tried very sort of gently suggesting where this was likely to end up, which is approval. There's not really any grounds in the current official plan to turn down a 4-unit building here, and we'll probably do it by zoning within a year and a half anyways. Yeah, I'll leave it there. That's sort of as frank an assessment as I can give at this point.
Yeah, no, that's appreciated. I mean, I think it's just about transparency, right? Like a year ago, well, 2 years ago now, we were told it wouldn't happen, and it's just so easy, like you said, over and over and over again, we do it. Well, like,
Yep.
Don't tell neighborhoods you're not going to do it, or pretend and let
I
them.
didn't. Right, I don't work for the city.
Well, you sort of do. You run it. I don't love that excuse. Sorry.
No, had you
You only want
asked
to make the changes there. You
yeah,
can't
the folks who promised you, it wasn't the city that promised you. So you went through a committee of adjustment and at that point it would have been the LPAT, I think, process, right? So city council never weighed in, and city staff never really weighed in, right? The committee of adjustment is very different from city council.
Well, how do we get city council and city staff involved and to care?
So on this one, because they want to do a rezoning, it is a change, right? Council will have to vote on this, as opposed to what you went through, which was a committee of adjustment process, to which I'm hands off. Councilors are hands off to the committee of adjustment, and we're told to be hands off. It's a different body from city council. So in this case, a developer promised you something. And we've heard those promises from developers before. So I don't want you to, I take umbrage at the suggestion that I told you, or that the city told you, that 4 units would never go in here. A developer promised that to you. And now a new landowner is coming to the table seeking to go back on that commitment that was made by the previous owner. Where I am is that's upsetting to me, right? You folks poured good money and heart and soul into your committee of adjustment, particularly fight. And it does upset me to see that commitment is being backed off on. But I also know that 4 units per building is, this city council is probably going to go in that direction anyways.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on to some more questions because I see a couple more hands. I think the next one I saw was Tina's. So Tina, do you want to go ahead with your question? You there, Tina?
There.
While you're, there you go.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Two concerns. The first is about infrastructure, sewer, both storm and sewage infrastructure, which to my knowledge is aging on this street and has not been addressed by the city to date. But if someone can speak to that, I would appreciate it. Perhaps Councillor Leeper, you could comment on any plans to review what we have and potentially update this to mitigate future problems, which I can definitely foresee given the conversations that we've had this evening. And secondly, I am going to address the parking issue primarily because in the winter, I would really like to know how anyone expects a fire truck, even an ambulance, to get down this street in the winter, at least without a street parking ban in the winter. Something has to change. It is very much a safety issue, and I have not yet heard anyone speak to this.
Tina, there's 2 ways in which seasonal parking bans come into effect. The first of them is by way of petition. So that's a simple numbers game. Somebody requests a petition from the city, they prepare it, and then if it gets the support of 2/3 of property owners, then the change is made. It comes by my desk, but I just concur with whatever. If there's a successful petition, I concur with it and don't bring politics into it. The second way is we can ask our emergency services folks to go out and make an assessment as to whether or not they're comfortable that they can get their equipment through. And really almost overnight, a change can be affected if emergency services feels that they can't adequately service the street. So that's usually done through my office, where you ask me to get in touch with the paramedic and fire and our traffic services, and they'll take a look at the street to determine whether or not they consider that it needs to be restricted in the winter. And if they feel there's a real safety issue, they can unilaterally and without going through the petition process enact that seasonal parking ban. With respect to infrastructure, Jocelyn, I'm going to guess that you're not required to submit a servicing study for what you're proposing.
Not as far as I know.
Yeah.
And I honestly am not aware of any concerns in this neighborhood, but it's absolutely something we will go and check.
Yeah, I'll say on any given project, there may not be a concern. And certainly if you're taking 1 4-bedroom unit and turning it into 2 2-bedroom units, I don't think anyone is going to suggest that would be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But overall in Westboro, we have a really serious issue with the stormwater management. The infrastructure master plan, about which I know
I was gonna say that's
you
underway
folks have
right now.
probably been reading me write about that a lot over the past several months. The infrastructure master plan is struggling with how are we going to reconcile the intensification in Westboro and Westboro is a particular concern with stormwater management. They're proposing a number of measures that would require developers to do rooftop or cistern management of stormwater in order to prevent the flooding. We'll see how that debate goes over the course of the next 4 or 5 months. There was the stormwater, and then in terms of the pipes, I have to imagine your pipes will get done eventually. As you go around the ward, you'll see that there are millions and millions of dollars being spent on renewals right now, because Westboro's pipes are just they're at that age. I don't, and sorry if I'm sound a little distracted, I'm just pulling up the construction forecast. There's nothing in the forecast for Parkview. So they have the city has an asset management plan. They know how old the pipes are, they know about when they should be replaced, and they get done in that priority. Have you been having water main breaks on Parkview?
I can't, there is a neighbor on Parkview that in actual fact has had paid for a private company to assess the pipe structure along the street because of water pooling at her corner.
Okay.
And they ran a camera down those pipes, and certainly that information could be provided to this group and to yourself. My understanding is that the conclusion from that was that these pipes are definitely aging. I'm not talking about 4 more persons per building creating the straw that's going to break the camel's back.
Yeah.
But we are talking about more densification on this street. You know, you can't have one without the other.
Yep. No, and that's
so I'd like it to be noted, and I would also hope that you would, of your own accord, contact the fire department and give them the information of what is going to be happening on the street, not just the way it is now, but what is going to be happening, so that they have a full view of what they are going to be facing in perhaps 5 or 7 years.
Yeah. Okay, I will take that back. I can't make you that commitment today, because right across the city, we are going to be upzoning a lot of things. You're not going to see the upzoning that many areas are. Allowing 4 units per residential lot is not a huge change from the 3 units that's allowed today. As opposed to, I know, the really significant infrastructure concerns that they have in what we call the bungalow belt, where for generations only single detached homes have been allowed to be built. And that's going to change to 3 or 4 units per lot. And that'll probably be the priority. But as we go through that comprehensive zoning bylaw review, sorry, I'm thinking out loud again. As we go through the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, let me make sure that the planners are fully bringing emergency services in to give consideration to the parking pressures that are going to result from that. And that may result in more difficult operations for them.
Okay, I appreciate that, Jeff. And there will potentially be a petition presented to you as well, unless you can beat us to it.
Yeah, no, it's I'm struggling with this one because I know where we're going as a city, and I'm sort of hoping that someone has got a silver bullet with respect to the planning rationale that would withstand a challenge. But I think the people to whom you should probably be addressing yourselves right now is the developer, who are trying to decide whether or not to move ahead with this. Because once they file an application, if they're determined to follow through with that, I don't have a lot of leverage.
Well, developers representatives are with us this evening. They're
Exactly.
listening to our
Exactly.
concerns.
And I can agree with most of what Councillor Leeper has said in terms of it's very easy to get one-sided parking on the street. Did it at the street. I live right beside a community area with a very small parking lot. We have the exact same parking problems. We now have parking on one side of the street. It happened overnight. My advice to you, express a preference for which side you would like that parking to be limited on. If you don't do that, you don't get the choice. They just impose it. So just personal experience, it did help a lot with the width of the street and the snow clearing. The stormwater management obviously is not going to change on this property. There's no changes contemplated. So what has been approved with the grading and drainage plan that came with it is what's going to stay one way or the other, whether we move forwards with this application or not. Water, in terms of sanitary and potable water, I don't even think they would be asked for in terms of the building permit and zoning, because it's such a small change. I can't think of any triggers, and going from a 4-bedroom apartment, usually not totally, but water and sanitary, generally the quantities, the uses are geared to square footage, number of bathrooms, and number of bedrooms. That's how the calculations, I'm being very rough here, but that's generally how they calculate them out. Nothing would change in terms of usage for splitting into 2 separate apartments. So that doesn't really, it's information for you. I'm not sure though that it's helps any of your concerns, other than it won't really change anything, adding the additional units.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to our next question. Lori, you've had your hand up for a while. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thanks. A number of things have already been spoken to, and I'm just getting the idea that there's really not much conversation of whether this is 3 units or 4 units. I that's my frustration, that things didn't meet tests before the application went to appeal, and we lost that at the province. And so I feel like there's Jeff, you made it clearer that it wasn't the city that promised, so that at least I understand that it wasn't the city that went back on the promise. But since it sounds like it's going ahead, is what it sounds like to me, I'd just like to underline some of what people have said. One is that we counted, and this street has gone from 22 dwellings to, if you count the new buildings as 16 units, it's going from 22 to 46 households. That's very significant, and because of the size of the property, there are already more that we know will be coming down. So I just want that to be noted, that is a huge increase. In the pipes were done in 1959. The engineer said they're in bad too. I've heard too, there was that engineer that Tina just referenced, and we had someone looking at our pipe going from the house to the road, and he had said that the main pipe down the street is really in bad shape, and every time an addition, a new house goes in, there's a new section of pipe, and he said it's just up and down and up and down the length of the street, and he said it's
Can
only.
can I just ask, pipes, I'm going to assume that we're talking about stormwater here.
That's my understanding, and
Well,
I don't know much about it.
a new
No, if he's-
house wouldn't add a new pipe.
No, so he said when there's a section going from the house to the road, when there's a new build like this, he said there's a section down the road that is added, like that's replaced is what it is, because the old section isn't adequate. That's how it was explained to me. I mean, I don't know it. What he said is because of all the new builds, and and what I believe he meant was the what comes from this. So it's not just,
I
it's not.
think
just-
I know what you're
everyone.
talking about. I think you're talking about sanitary pipes. But
Yeah, I think
when
it
they
is
put a
actually.
new spring line from a
That's
house
right.
to the sanitary pipes in the street, and you're right, this happens all over the city, and it's a good way to renew infrastructure without charging taxpayers. Usually the pipe they're connecting to is so fragile, they actually have to go out to find a good spot, cut it, and insert a whole new piece.
Yes.
So the spring line has a secure connection point. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but anyways.
That's what.
Sanitary pipes, that makes sense then. Thank you.
And so he said what he's seeing there is of course where the connection is from an old section to the new section, they settle at different rates. And so it's very uneven under the road, and therefore just a matter of time before it doesn't do what it's there to do. I'm relaying secondhand information, but it's because they're attaching plastic to cement and they settle differently. So that's what he's seeing under the road. That's all I can tell you. And it was also stormwater that was a concern. And when you take away trees, which doesn't take care of the rain and then have old infrastructure, that's a problem. So I am concerned about that. Back to what Sharon was saying about compensation going toward Hampton Park. Jeff, I don't know if that's for your department or not, but that Sharon has a team of volunteers. So you have very economical assistance in the park. And I hope you'll make use of that because it really is available to you.
Yeah, I'm going to take one step at a time and just figure out whether or not any resources were put toward tree replacement, because I'm hearing maybe there weren't, which is concerning. But then in terms of putting those into Hampton, I'd be reasonably confident that we could accomplish that. So.
Okay.
And working, of course, with Sharon. Obviously, we don't want the city forestry folks just going out to. We've been down that road before with Sharon, so we'll make sure there's some consultation.
Okay, and just another vote for plowing the park, because the parking lot, because that's space that's already there. It's right near the street, and I feel like that's something the city could offer.
Yeah. And thank you for reminding me, because that is something I've written down. That every year I beg those guys to like plow the parking lots at Hampton, and every year they do not. But I think if this moves forward, I think I disagree with Jocelyn. I think that the creation of 4 units will probably result in a few more cars on the street, and that parking pressure could be the argument I need to finally be successful with the city on plowing finally the parking lot.
Good.
Just to interject on that one particular aspect, last year, Tom Peckloff, your former assistant, had also been begging them to plow the multi-use path that goes by the dog run. Well, they plowed that, but they didn't plow the lot.
Yeah.
So anybody who's, in a mobility device or, like has a stroller, there's no way you're getting from the parking lot to the nice plowed path. So it was a little silly. So yeah, do one, do the other, like ideally both.
Yeah, no, if this goes through, I kind of like my odds this year. So I know Alice will have captured that as a note. I'll be putting this in the hands of Ben in my office, who's got some good relationships over with the city, and maybe this is the year we can finally get that done.
That'd be good. That's all.
Okay. Thanks, Lori. Okay, next, back to Krista. Krista, please go ahead.
Hi. So I know there was a lot of discussion about the zoning and the changes to zoning and the new city's official plan and like future plans. I'm not sure where all of that netted, to be honest. And maybe just because I'm not a planner. But I one of the things that I guess I took away was that, we aren't on that outer edge. And as Lori was saying, we've already experienced a lot of intensification, and I'm sure we will again with other developments in our area. So, I think this is me making a very honest request of the developer. We requested these not to be 4 units. Please don't develop them in 4 units. You may be developing on our street again. Please respect the request that we made with the original developer. I understand that you aren't the original developer, but that commitment was made to us, and then it was sold. So we're really hoping that that commitment can be honored in good faith, because who knows when you might be developing on the street again. And, we clearly hope to have a continued good conversation in good faith. So I guess that's my heartfelt, would really appreciate that.
I understand. I understand that, and that's why we want to speak to you. It's an open conversation. We have to go through it. We have to give recommendations to Dave and to his clients. I am gonna do the small repeat here. It may well be that through the city's comprehensive rezoning process, 4 units may become an as of right on every property in the evolving neighborhood overlay. That is simply where things are going. It's your neighborhood is part of the pocket of that the planners have drawn out as being the focus of where that intensification is going to go. You're right, you're not on an edge, and so meaning you're not along Kirkwood, you're not along Carling, and that's where I'm gonna say towers, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's where the real apartment buildings are gonna go in. But where you see residential neighborhoods is where 3 and 4 unit is going to become an as of right through the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So it may be that our advice to the owners is just to sit tight. They might do it for free for you. It's again, I would rather give you guys like the absolute honest answer right now. The alternative is for us to go back to them and say, look, you know, the neighbors are not going to like this. You will probably get it because of the policies in the official plan do support your proposal. But there's some bargaining to be done to buy some goodwill with respect to, I don't know if there's a landscape plan on this. I don't know if there's room for trees in the front yard. I don't know if there are other things that could be done to make this okay. Sometimes leverage is there, but shouldn't say okay, but to make it more palatable. But the alternative is it just may become something that happens without them having to do anything. So
I totally hear you. And I think the difference is the drastic change in development. So we're not talking about a 4 unit that went up on 1 lot. We're talking about 2 lots that were then subdivided, and then 4 units are being proposed. So I think this would be a totally different conversation if the same developer came to us with a new plot of land and said, hey, look, we would like to develop 3 or 4 on that 1 unit. That's a very different intensification in terms of numbers, in terms of traffic, in terms of parking, in terms of tree damage, like the whole kind of kit and caboodle. So it's a matter of scale, precedence, I think in good faith. And I have a general question, more, I'm sorry, it's like more as a city resident than anything else, because maybe I clearly missed the memo on the new official plan. But I guess this question is to Jeff. Do you feel like the residents of Westboro, Hintonburg, and the others that are going to face these zoning changes are well aware of what's coming?
No. So the residents of Westboro north of Dover Court, where we did the Westboro infill rules, know Exactly, and they won't see a whole lot of change because we've already changed their zoning. The residents of Hintonburg have the new R4 because the R4s used to keep things at like 4 units. Now it's like 12 to 16. It's already been done. I keep writing in my newsletters and such about the intensification that's coming, but people don't really pay attention until a sign goes up across the way, by which point it's too late, right? So the official plan, I wrote a lot of stuff about the official plan. People's eyes would have glazed over at it, and they won't realize that there's this new official plan until a sign goes up across the street. The comprehensive zoning bylaw review, and forgive me, I'll take a second here with this, but the official plan describes the high level policies, and the dynamic that we've had in Westboro, particularly for probably a generation now, is that the zoning has always allowed things like singles and semis and triplexes. What became new was the severances that started happening about 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So the zoning in Westboro didn't recognize and those severances were supported by the official plan focus on intensification as it was elucidated in official, 2-3 official plans ago. And steadily, the zoning that actually described the official plan 20 years ago, the zoning that's in place hasn't changed and doesn't reflect anything like what the official plan says anymore. So that means that every single one of these things is a rezoning application, which results in time and money for the developer and a big controversial battle for the community. And it's not sustainable. The clearest example that I can point to is the Trailhead building. So the Trailhead across the street from Westboro Transit Station had zoning that was 4 to 6 stories. And I don't think most reasonable observers believe in this day and age that a parcel across from Westboro Transit Station should be limited to 4 to 6 stories. But we haven't changed the zoning in a generation. So now we're updating the zoning. So we've passed the official plan that says, okay, our low-rise neighborhoods are going to intensify with, 2 or 3 stories allowed, 3 or 4 units in each of these. Our corridors are going to be allowed to intensify to, 6 or 9 stories, and we're going to have big, tall buildings near the transit station. But that doesn't actually provide the zoning. So even if that's what the official plan says, when a developer wants to take advantage of the permissions, the vision of the official plan, they have to apply for a rezoning. Now the zoning is going to be updated with in detail with the what we call the performance standards. So, okay, in the low rise neighborhood, if we're going to have buildings that are 3 or 4 units and that are denser than what they were before to reflect what the official plan says, what are the setbacks going to be? How much of the lot area can the structures cover? How much area is going to be allowed to be paved over for driveway? How are we going to maintain room for trees? The really detailed stuff. So in March, they will drop the first draft of the comprehensive zoning bylaw where there will actually be details. And I think when that becomes public and becomes the subject of probably a year-long consultation, your community associations are going to be telling people, hey, there's something really important here. They're going to start allowing 3 or 4 units. They're going to start doing this. They're going to start doing that. My hope is that by the time we're done with the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, that virtually everyone will have some better understanding of what the official plan means. But it's too late to change the official plan. The consultations in the official plan were so airy-fairy that very few people listen to it, right? It's, yeah, we want to have 15-minute communities, and it's important we intensify so that we don't exacerbate urban sprawl and all these high-level concepts. But now that that's passed, it actually is the basis for the kinds of zoning applications that this developer and others are looking for. But it's too late to actually change the basic theories of the official plan. Sorry, I'm ranting on, I'm going on here, but it's people don't know
It's
yet.
it's
They
every-
will in 6 months. And our ward will be our ward will be less affected, right? Because we've already seen severances and we've seen all these sort of normal course things happening. The folks who are in for the biggest shock are in that bungalow belt, big swaths of R1 zoning. That's going to radically change to start allowing a lot more buildings at a lot greater density. And they're the ones who I think are going to be the most surprised by what the official plan is going to be allowing in that new comprehensive zoning bylaw.
And where is that bungalow belt, Jeff?
It's the stuff that's outside the old city of Ottawa. And I'm sorry, I don't mean for that to be a diminutive name for it, but it's what we call it here. So you think about the neighborhoods around Carlingwood, in College Ward, in Bay Ward, in Alta Vista Ward, you know, these big swaths of R1. People think about the suburbs as being, you know, these big homes on lots and only single detached. For 15 years now, the city has been requiring densities that are far surpassing the densities that we have in Westboro. You folks still have fairly big properties with small homes on them compared to what we're requiring in you know, Avalon, for example. But yeah, that bungalow belt that's in between the new dense suburbs and the dense Westboroughs and urban core neighborhoods is what we call the bungalow belt.
Hmm.
Old Gloucester, Old Nepean.
In Alta Vista,
Alta Vista is a big one.
Britannia Heights.
Yep. I'm trying to think, like around Carlingwood, Glaybar Park.
What about
Crystal Bay,
McKellar Park?
Crystal Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
McKellar Park?
McKellar Park is also going to be heavily affected, but I don't think it will actually change because people will continue to want to buy those homes, those like stone homes on big lots as singles. I think the competition, they'll be able to outcompete the developers. There's not going to be a lot of profit for the developers in McKellar Park, given the land values that homeowners are going to be able to command. Westboro went through 20 years of nice properties, but when people passed on, the properties were not so valuable that the young rich couples with the young families were willing to spend, you know, $1 million to buy them. They are now, but you can't get one. And so the developers were able to come in and outbid somebody with like a, you know, $250,000 more because they knew they were going to knock it down and build semi-detached. McKellar Park, I think people are going to compete for those homes at very high valuations to the point where there's not a lot of cheap, easy money, which is where the fly-by-night sort of infill developers come into it. I might be wrong, but Rockcliffe is another one, right? People aren't going to buy, the developers aren't going to be able to compete to buy those homes in Rockcliffe and knock them down and turn them into triplexes because the price competition from the most affluent residents of Ottawa is going to be too stiff.
Right.
You'll still be able to buy a single in Ottawa 20 years from now, but you're going to have to be very affluent to do it.
I just have a question related to development, if that's okay. If the developer is successful with adding this fourth unit, what, if any, change to the timetable on construction is there going to be?
Dave, can you answer that? I'm not sure that there is any change at all.
Yeah, not really any change at all. So if you don't mind, I'll make a couple points here. To Sharon's point about trees in the park, I think the developer would be happy to do that. We're changing from 1 4-bedroom unit into 2 2-bedroom units. So there's not a whole lot of change in bedrooms or any. And then there's potentially an opportunity to have 4 more parking spots in the back. Have 2 at each unit instead of 1. I know that the developer and I talked about this when I first got involved. So if there's no requirement to put a noise wall, we don't have to take the trees down that are there. Potentially, we can put another parking spot that might help alleviate some of the parking issues. And then some of that money for the noise wall that wouldn't go could be put towards putting extra trees in Hampton Park or something along those lines. So in terms of schedule, there's no change in schedule.
Can I
Those
just
buildings,
ask?
pardon me?
May I just ask, are the kitchens already roughed in?
I don't know that.
Okay. I'm guessing they are.
Yeah, I don't know that. I didn't ever see a second plan that sort of said, this is what we're gonna build. I haven't seen that. So I have the plan, the permit drawings, that's all I have, and Jocelyn has.
Okay.
Given that the last two anyways are still under construction, I mean, there are still building inspectors visiting it, so who knows? I'm not sure how that's much of an extensive retrofit anyways, just to bring those pipes down.
I
So-
know that the guys that are working on them were saying that they saw them as, they were prepared for 4 units. That's what they were saying.
Yeah, as far as we know, we haven't seen any other plans. We just have the stuff that was approved by the city. There could be some floating around that we don't know about. So I don't think there's any other questions that are outstanding that anyone was waiting for us to answer. I've tried to be as frank with you guys as possible about sort of what could happen here. I do appreciate your time. It's an hour and a half out of a Tuesday evening leading up to Christmas. Dave has heard everything. We will have a discussion about this. Fundamentally, it's whether we will advise the now owners on your concerns. Certainly, Krista, I totally, I think that's the most honest comment I've ever heard is, please just respect what was promised to us before. That's a really fair thing to ask as a resident. I mean, I really appreciate that. Do I expect the new owners who are coming into this, who didn't make that promise, feel that that's something they have to live with? I'm not sure, but we'll certainly talk to them about it.
It can only stand in
I'll
their
take that
good
away.
stead, right? Like,
Pardon me?
it can only stand in their good stead. I've been thinking a lot about this file over the past couple of days, and I'm having difficulties coming up with a planning rationale that would stand up at the Ontario Land Tribunal, right? But commitments were made here.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe you'll have to stand up in terms of you think.
Yeah, like council would not be able to refuse this. If you insisted on making an application, I'm struggling with how council would have a planning rationale to refuse this and have that
I see what you
refusal
mean.
upheld
I
by
understand.
the tribunal. But and you know what, that's a lens through which I look constantly as we deal with planning files, you know, every 2 weeks. But in this instance, I think I'm just disappointed that after the community put so much work into that initial application, I'm very disappointed on their behalf that the builder or that a new owner would not respect those commitments.
Yeah, it's unclear whether the new owner was aware of those commitments or not. I will say though that just for you all to take home with you, my email, I believe, is available on the notice that was circulated, and certainly through Jeff, and I can repeat it now. It's J Chandler, exactly like you think it would be spelled, at jfsa.com. Consider if parking is a really big issue, if a second parking spot was available at the rear of each of those units, is that something that would go a ways to, you know, even improving the situation beyond what's there right now? Like I said, I don't know that we can predict what sort of parking requirements will be changed from a 3 to a 4. It could get worse, could get better, don't know.
Wouldn't you be
Sorry?
challenged to put another parking spot back there though? I mean,
I'm not sure. Dave just mentioned that, so that's something that I would be curious about.
there's,
How they would do that.
we've got regulations
Not without
around
a
soft
major-
landscaping.
Not without a major impact on the park. I mean, it's ridiculous that there's parking back there anyway right now. But anyway, should
Yeah,
we
it would
worry
have to
about
be,
more
it would
parking
have
back
to be
there?
looked
That's
at.
a horrible idea.
There are no good ideas at the moment as far as people are concerned with in terms of putting another unit in this building. That's pretty clear. Like I said, we're here to listen. I wanted to hear through your concerns. There aren't any super surprising to me other than, what Krista mentioned about, just live with the commitment that was made. And it may be, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen to the comprehensive zoning bylaw either in terms of where these neighborhoods will find themselves, but that's where we're at right now. It's a planner's dream that everybody starts paying attention to zoning and official plans, We can stop explaining what we do for a living. But
Okay, Jocelyn,
that's
thank
really
you.
all I have to add, other than to really genuinely thank you for your time.
Jocelyn, thanks
sorry,
for coming back to us before making an application. I do appreciate that. Ordinarily, we're dealing with an application that has been made. In this case, no application's been made, so I do appreciate your willingness to face the community and at least ask before proceeding with an application. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you everyone who participated. I mean, I think I'm not I don't want to speak for the whole community, but I think that we greatly appreciate dialogue. And, I appreciate being heard. I hope that what we say means something.
It certainly matters.
Yeah.
Jocelyn, just before we sign off, I do see one more question in the Q&A, and it's, where will snow removal go from these units? Who manages garbage maintenance, and how will lot maintenance be managed by the owner? I'm assuming these are questions you don't have answers to today, but I will let you.
No idea.
Yeah.
But Dave, do you know?
I mean, I don't have an in-depth answer for you, but what I do know is that the new owner or the current owner has started a landscape maintenance company to manage his properties, and they have trucks and all the facilities to remove the snow off site and cut the grass and the garbage and everything. Yeah, sorry.
I'll treat that one with a grain of salt.
Sure.
The snow is, there's going to come a point at which the snow is going in the street, but that's the same with all of these builds. So,
Okay.
but garbage shouldn't be an issue. Like your property management company is going to have that stuff out at the curb and neat on collection day, and it will get taken away with the rest of the street side collections. So, because these are not going to be inexpensive units by any means, they back onto the park. I assume that there's these are not bargain student houses, and I assume that the management will be probably reflective of the rents that people will be paying. So,
correct.
Okay, with that, I think we will wrap it up. And thanks again, Jocelyn and Dave and Tim
Thank you
for coming out tonight and presenting this. And also thanks to all the residents that took the time to come out tonight too. And just before we go, just another small reminder that this meeting will be up on the Kitchissippi Ward YouTube channel, probably in the next few days. So if someone wants to watch it after, they will be able to do so. So with that, I will say good night and thanks again to everyone for attending. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Have a good night, all.
Bye.